Larry Kudlow Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Hello, folks. I'm Larry Kudlow. This is the Larry Kudlow Show. It's great to be with you. As always, great pleasure. By the way, you can live stream us on the Internet. No problem. You catch everything. LarryKudlowShow.com, right? LarryKudlowShow.com. You can hear us all across the country, around the world, throughout the globe, all around the solar system, including the Milky Way. And please, during the week, Fabulous Fox Business. Dial us in, 4 to 5 p.m. every day. Fabulous Fox Business Network. The name of the show is Kudlow. And I love company at 4. If you can't get there at 4 for some reason, why, then you can just text your favorite 9-year-old, and she will show you how to DVR the show. You'll never miss a thing. So, very interesting what's going on. First of all, I want to say, with respect to the right direction that we're moving in to crush and finally defeat Iran, Donald Trump, President Trump, is winning this war, and he's going to win this war, and the United States is going to win this war, and the United States and its great ally Israel are going to win this war. It is not going to come easily, the final end, but we will win. What you've been watching lately is a big bull market in stocks, which started a couple weeks ago. It's almost a meltup. Huge increases. S&P, Dow Jones, you name it. S&P's at a record. NASDAQ's at a record. Oil prices are starting to come down. But it's going to take time. And the president has a backbone that he's going to take out the most gruesome government since the Nazis of 100 years ago, more or less. About 100 years ago. And he's doing it without putting 200,000 or 300,000 boots on the ground or taking enormous casualty. It's principally an air and naval war. He's doing it without getting $200, $250 oil. But he's doing it with fabulous military strength and the brilliant ploy of the blockade so that Iran will go broke. No oil, no money. No oil, no money. And the radical Islamic Revolutionary Guard, I think eventually will be starved out. We have a ways to go with this blockade. We are now in control of the Persian Gulf, the Strait of Hormuz, the Strait of Oman. We're in control, and we will stay in control, as Mr. Trump said yesterday. And I think this whole turn of events, as we, close the vice around Iran, and I've said this before during the Easter Passover season, it is a miracle. It is a Trumpian miracle. It is providential because Iran must be destroyed, the current regime in Iran, not the Iranians themselves, the 80 million some odd who are undoubtedly ordinary good folks, but the 5 or 10 million that line up with the radical Islamicists, they're the ones that have to be taken out. And we're making great progress, but it's not done yet. There was some euphoria yesterday, but you cannot trust the Iranians. You can never trust this crowd, ever. So this morning you wake up and there are the headlines, whereas yesterday Iran said that the Strait of Hormuz is open and they were helping to get rid of the sea mines. Today they've closed it. Yesterday's idea was as long as there was a ceasefire between Israel and Lebanon, the Strait of Hormuz would be open. But that's all gone now. It's all gone. And they're shooting in the Persian Gulf. There shouldn't be any surprise there. There's a certain amount of euphoria. We're moving in the right direction, but it's going to take a while. And we will be talking about all of that and more with General Jack Keane at the half hour and other guests over the course of the show, Robert O'Brien, Dan Briette, and so forth. But my key point at the top is what the brave, strong Mr. Trump has done. It's like a miracle. I call it a Trumpian miracle. All right? This thing's closing down. We will close them down, but it will not come easily. And you can never don't take their word for it, ever. Sheer force, military force, economic force, financial force, those are the key ingredients, not what they say. And fortunately, President Trump continues his own mantra that there must never be a nuclear weapon and that Iran must give up what he calls the nuclear dust, meaning the enriched uranium, of which I think there could be 1,000 pounds. They're going to show us and turn it over, but if they don't, we will take it. Again, I don't believe anything Iran says. We will take it. That would be really the only boots on the ground. But progress is being made. They will have to stop backing proxy terrorist groups. They're not going to get any money, not a dime, until finally that crowd is out. The embargo is a terribly powerful weapon. Brilliant ploy by Mr. Trump. Brilliant ploy. I mean, I call this providential because, first of all, we're winning. We're going to win. And sometimes when you're fighting such completely open-ended evil, I call it the gruesome regime. Not since Hitler's Nazism have we seen anything like this. You know, killing thousands and thousands and tens of thousands of people at random. Insanity, pure insanity. But we're getting the job done. Benjamin Netanyahu, Donald Trump, CENTCOM, phenomenal. The whole thing's phenomenal. And look, on the continued bright side, the financial markets they're basically telling us that things are moving in the right direction. That's the basic line. We'll have some fun covering the stock market. I mean, last week the Dow was up 1,500 points. The S&P had a new record, 7,126. The prior record was 7,000. NASDAQ's almost at 25,000, so we're doing very well. Our interest rates are low, and, of course, we've been cutting taxes here. And there's a lot of, the pro-growth policies from the One Big Beautiful Bill, which we will discuss. All that is part of it. But again, you cannot, it's just fascinating. You pick up the paper this morning, or you get online, and you see that once again Iran has gone back against its word. They're not cooperating. These are not, people of goodwill. They're not credible people, but we know that. Mr. Trump knows that, okay? He likes diplomacy. He likes to put on a positive spin. I don't blame him. But there will be hard work ahead to finish this off, and General Jack Keane will help us understand just how hard it's going to be. But this is from Fox News' Trey Yangst, our reporter, intrepid reporter in the Middle East. The Strait of Hormuz is under full IRGC control and effectively closed at this moment. Multiple vessels have been forced to turn around since this morning as they attempted to pass through the strait. The IRGC opened fire on at least one vessel as part of the closure policy they declared last night. Incredible. Absolutely incredible. But here's the thing. We expect this. All right, and the final closure is going to be very difficult. But one of the points that I have in the back of my mind, we've talked about this on the TV show yesterday, all the Democrats who have opposed what Mr. Trump is doing, even though their presidents agreed that Iran was a threat, they did not have the courage or backbone to close them down. The Democrats have opposed this. The legacy media has opposed this. They're all going to be in for a pretty big surprise. Because once this is finished, and it will be finished before long, I think Americans and American voters are going to thank and congratulate President Trump for doing what he's doing, for stopping a nuclear threat that could hit us, for ending this gruesome, awful, Nazi-like regime. They will thank him for this, for putting peace in the Middle East and protecting Israel and the Middle East and Europe. The Europeans are so stupid, the NATO Europeans, no courage whatsoever. But in fact, Iran has the capabilities to strike at them right now, even though they're afraid of their own shadow and won't, didn't quickly help us in the Persian Gulf area and Hormuz and so forth. Terrible. But this is providential. This will work out. This will be a political plus come midterm elections. Oil prices will settle lower. Gasoline prices will settle lower. The bump up in energy is a small price to pay to get rid of the worst modern-day dictatorship. Small price to pay. The economy itself is in very decent shape. Profits are roaring. Profits are the mother's milk of stocks and the lifeblood of the economy. That's why the stock market's going up. Yes, we're going in the right direction to get rid of this awful dictatorship. But more importantly, profits are the lifeblood of business. And healthy businesses hire workers and pay higher wages, which is what family income and spending comes from. And we just had this big tax bill. I mean, we just had a $100 billion tax cut as of April 15th, roughly, round numbers. 100 billion in round numbers. Some 50-odd million people, I think it's 52 or 53 million people, took advantage of new additional deductions, on tips and overtime and seniors and cars and you name it, child credits, and, of course, 100% expensing, building factories, tougher trade policy. We have a very strong, durable, resilient economy. And that's what's showing up in the stock market also, on top of the fact that we're moving in the right direction to end this evil Iranian regime. End this evil Iranian regime. The economic and financial blockade will be the final blow. You'll see. They're going to wind up not even making payroll in a couple of weeks. There's no rush. I'm so glad, even President Trump has sounded maybe too optimistic yesterday, but he said we're keeping the blockade on. We're not giving them any money. Obama gave them, $100 billion plus in cash and gold. Incredibly stupid. Years ago. No way. We're not doing that. Nobody can ever trust Iran. This whole episode won't be over until it's completely over. But here's the deal, kids. America, under one of its very strongest commanders-in-chief ever, will win this war. And that is a plus for mankind. And I'm Kudlow, and we'll be back in a moment.
The Larry Kudlow Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Larry Kudlow Show. Entertaining and informative on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
By the way, talking about the midterm elections, where the anti-Trump media and Democrats are way too overconfident, way too overconfident. And I've seen numbers from good polls that show, yes, the Dems have a lead, but they only have a small lead. And again, I said this war is going to be a big plus for Mr. Trump and his supporters when people go to the polls. Big plus. But, maybe the GOP has not advertised or marketed their tax cuts as well as I would prefer they do. But it's been a huge tax cut. April 15th, the withholding finally came through. And you got your standard deductions for individuals, married couples, heads of households. All those deductions went up significantly. No tax on tips up to $25,000. No tax on overtime. $6,000 deduction for seniors. $6,000 increased deduction for seniors. Car loan interest deductions also. SALT deduction cap increased to $40,000 from $10,000. Estate tax deduction raised. The child tax credit was enhanced. Business deductions, like the bonus depreciation, 100% immediate expensing for the purchase of equipment, machinery, and the building of factories. Unbelievable list, on and on and on. Big numbers. We're talking about very big numbers here. From the Treasury Department. The average refund over this tax filing season is $3,400. It's an 11% increase. In households across America, over 53 million filers, 53 million filers claimed at least one of President Trump's signature new tax cuts. The average tax cut for filers benefiting is over $800. Over 6 million, listen to this, 6 million filers have claimed no tax on tips, with an average deduction of $7,100, $7,100. Over 25 million filers claimed no tax on overtime, with an average deduction of $3,100. The enhanced deduction for seniors, listen to this, enhanced deduction for seniors was an average deduction of $7,500. Over 1 million filers got the no tax on car loan interest. That's $1,800. 5 million Trump accounts opened up, with 1.2 million eligible for the pilot program, $1,000. I'll tell you, folks, tax cuts will do it for you, boost the economy. There are going to be a lot of wins behind this economy as oil prices and gasoline settles down and we wipe out the Nazi regime in Iran. I'm Kudlow. General Keane coming up after this.
The Larry Kudlow Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Larry Kudlow Show. Entertaining and informative on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
So, as I mentioned in the opening, Iran's so-called opening of the Strait of Hormuz lasted about a day, and now they're firing on ships, and it just goes to show you can't believe anything they say. And we welcome back to our show the great General Jack Keane, retired four-star and chairman of the Institute for the Study of War, and Fox News senior strategic analyst, also a Presidential Medal of Freedom recipient. I was in the room when he got it. You know, General Keane, it's exactly what you told us last night. You cannot believe the Iranian government. You cannot believe the Iranian government. And while some things seem to be going in the right direction, we're not there yet, are we, sir? We're not there yet.
No, and what it's demonstrating, Larry, is how fractured the Iranian leadership really is. You know, because we have people on the political side saying one thing, that the straits are open, and then we have the people on the IRGC side who are saying, no, they're not. And the IRGC obviously won that discussion because it's the IRGC, the guys with the guns that fired on three tankers at a minimum, is what people in Central Command are telling me. So, yes, the people with the guns inside Iran, not too surprising, Larry, are always going to have more influence, particularly as a result of the Ayatollah's death. It's pretty obvious that the new leader doesn't have anywhere near the strength and and certainly power that his father had. And so that has given rise to others, political leaders, IRGC leaders, to impose their will. And at the end of the day, for the second time, I'm saying that the guy with the gun seems to be winning out.
And you have mentioned a number of times on this radio and on the TV the names of people. They may be down the list, but they're rough. They're rough hombres. I mean, there's too much celebration about regime change. There's no regime change. Personalities may change, but they keep coming up with worse and worse apples. We have to be aware of that. I mean, we must be aware of that.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. I think we're struggling in our intel agencies to get a handle on what is happening inside of Iran, because it's just, so dynamic. We're dealing with new players for sure, but still, so our audience understands, the faces have changed, the names have changed, but the ideology, the commitment to what Iran has stood for 47 years, they are as hardline as anybody that has gone before them. And anybody that suggests that they're not is just not looking at really what is happening and what their behavior is going forward. And the political guys that are doing the talking, as we've said before, to our negotiators, they say exactly what our negotiators want to hear. Oh, yeah, you can come in and take our nuclear enriched uranium. Yeah, sure. We're willing to draw down our ballistic missiles. We're willing to stop funding the proxies. That's all talk. And even if there's a verbal agreement, we still don't have anything in terms of actual action. And even if they sign a document, I'm still skeptical about their execution. Why? Because they haven't changed. They lie and they cheat. Where they're coming from, survival number one, and recover and rebuild number two. That is what their objective. The means to do that is comply as much as possible and concede issues to the Americans in negotiations, drag out the ceasefire as long as possible so we can recover our ballistic missiles and the rest of it, and put pressure on the president by dragging it out as it gets closer to the midterm election, and also oil prices don't go maybe to the level we want them to go, so that he'll agree with our concession, and that would be give us some unfrozen assets in the billions and remove sanctions. That is really what they're trying to achieve in terms of recovery. And right now we're saying no to that. You can imagine, our partner in all of this, I think, is really the Iranian people. And sometimes we lose sight of it. And I think we should not lose sight of it. Can you imagine how demoralized they are when they hear that we're negotiating a deal with them that may lead to their recovery and throw them a lifeline, which means they have to deal with these people at some level of strength for years to come? I think we got to really keep our foot on the pedal here and make certain this regime, whatever deal we make, and if we're making a deal versus returning to combat operations, that the objective is to weaken the regime as much as possible so they're vulnerable to the Iranian population at some point.
Well, sir, even in yesterday's, I'll call it, high tide of optimism, there was a lot of euphoria yesterday, probably too much euphoria. But President Trump said time and again that the economic and financial oil and money blockade will not be removed, and that loose talk about giving them $20 billion in cash from various bank accounts offshore that will not be permitted. I mean, the blockade is so essential here, and I think the president got ahead of himself on the negotiations, but nonetheless, we're not going to give up. And the idea of bankrupting them and starving them out of power is still out there. That's got to be the key point right now.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. And in the near term, obviously the Iranians are challenging the Straits of Hormuz and our desire to open it up by what they're doing. We're going to have to direct Cooper, the CENTCOM commander, one, maintain the blockade, two, open up the Straits of Hormuz, start with demining completely, and then also securing it and escorting ships through it. If the Iranians attack us in doing that, as they just attacked tankers, then we'll return to combat operations full throttle. I think that's the path we should be on as a result of this. And I don't know how we continue to pursue a deal, Larry, given what they've just done over the Straits of Hormuz. And I'm sure the people that we're negotiating with are doing everything they can within their own power structure to try to get control over the IRGC and what they're doing. But that may be pretty tough for the reasons we've already stated. It looks like they're really in control. And we said that well over a week ago, that the IRGC has more leverage than anybody inside that government, it appears.
You know, sir, I wondered yesterday, too, because when they made this announcement about opening the Strait of Hormuz, they were tying it to the Israeli-Lebanon ceasefire. I mean, it wasn't like a full square, four square, announcement that they're, going to change their whole policy. It just seemed kind of phony to me. You touched on it last night on the TV show. And then, of course, what happens this morning? I didn't understand it. We're not close to an agreement. We can't negotiate here. I mean, they have to, nobody can believe a word of it. They're not crying uncle just yet. Maybe a little bit, but they're not really crying uncle. Let's starve them out. Let's starve the Revolutionary Guard out. I love this blockade. That's the key point.
No, I agree with you, but that's not what the president hears. He hears his negotiators come and tell him, because the Iranians are telling our guys, we're willing to do X, Y, and Z. And that's refreshing, and it's comforting for our guys to hear all of that. And they're not thinking through, what's the objective in doing that? What are they trying to achieve? Why do they appear, at least verbally, willing to make all these concessions? And yes, we got to maintain a healthy scope of skepticism about all of this. And the sooner we put them to the test about it, the better. But I think that a vivid example of the test is right now before our eyes. The IRGC has put their foot down and saying in so many words, you're not going to open up the Straits of Hormuz. We're in charge here. And they're rubbing our nose in it. That's the truth of it. And they're saying the heck with the negotiations that are going on. We're going to stay in power. We're going to survive this. And they think they have, as long as they believe they're in charge of the Straits of Hormuz, they have leverage. And we've obviously exercised some leverage against them. I mean, we shut down the distribution of all of their oil. And yet they came back and pushed back on us in doing this. And I think what they believe, if they stalemate with us like this, we're stopping their distribution. The Iranians are stopping everybody else's distribution of oil. In the end, America will weaken on this because the pressure on them economically and politically is far greater than the pressure that the IRGC and the regime is willing to take. In other words, they're willing to go through cash flow problems and other issues that they'll have. They're willing to go through the problems in their oil production. If the wells don't continue to function properly, then they begin to actually have maintenance issues associated with them. So the whole distribution system has to go. Oil's got to pump, pipelines got to be open, tankers got to be pulling up to the distribution points. And what the Iranians are doing right now, we watched them yesterday. They had 5 tankers pull up to their distribution point at Karg Island. And people thought well, they're going to try to run the straits with that. No, they're not. They're just keeping their oil production going. They're using the tankers as a storage site, in the Persian Gulf before it gets to the Straits of Hormuz, because they want to keep that production going. And then when it shuts down and they cannot distribute oil out of their pipeline at Carg Island, then the oil wells will have to shut down as well.
For months.
That's going to cause huge problems for them.
Yeah.
So I think they're in this to stick it out, stalemate the United States, and assume the political and economic pressure on the president will force his hand.
I think they got the wrong guy on that one, sir. I really do.
I agree with you. I mean, he's got to be pretty frustrated today dealing with what's happening here, and also looking at his own guys and saying to them, well, who's in charge here, guys? I thought you were telling me we're close to a deal here. We got these guys shutting down the Straits of Hormuz. That doesn't sound like a deal to me. You know he's saying it, and he's got a right to be saying it. What the heck is going on here? Who's in charge? Who are we talking to? Is this just empty words we're getting here? Yeah, that conversation, believe me, is likely going on now in the White House, or already has gone on.
Yep. Yeah. Knowing him as I do, you cross him in these things, he'll be very angry, and we'll strike back.
Yeah, and he has a right to be, and some of that should actually start with his own people being sucked in a little bit here.
Yeah, huh? General, can we take a quick commercial break?
Yeah, sure.
All right, you're wonderful. The great General Jack Keane, folks, you can hear his logic. Nobody can trust the Iranians. Nobody can trust the Iranians. When we come back, maybe we'll talk a little bit about the so-called denuclearization and what that might entail, and shifting the enriched uranium from Iran back to the United States. But we may be further away from all that than we think. Anyway, General Jack Keane will be right with us. I'm Kudlow, folks. Please stick around. Lots more coming.
The Larry Kudlow Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Larry Kudlow Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
One of the things that was beginning to be discussed yesterday by President Trump and others was the whole issue of removing the enriched uranium from Iran and back into American hands, roughly 1,000 pounds of such enriched uranium. So we're here with great General Jack Keane, the chairman of the Institute for the Study of War and Fox News senior strategic analyst. General Keane, you were talking briefly about this, but this actually, I mean, I know I'm getting ahead of the story because of what's happened today, but looking down the road, this would be a complicated piece of activity, would it not?
What activity are you referring to?
Moving the enriched uranium from Iranian hands into American hands.
Yes, it would be. But some of it we understand. And listen, we don't have perfect intelligence on this, and nor should we. But it's been widely reported that a lot of the enriched uranium is underneath the rubble at one of the sites. And so it's an engineering operation and then a major labor-intensive operation to do all of that. And it would take some time. And there's other suspicions that there's some enriched uranium at another site that they recently developed. Many refer to it as Pickaxe Mountain, which is deeply buried itself. There may be centrifuges there for sure capable of enriching uranium. It's not certain that the highly enriched uranium, some of it is also there. I think our intel guys, CIA and Mossad, have a pretty good feel, for where all of this is, and have some confidence in it. Of course, the Iranians, if there was a way to deceive us about where it all is, they certainly would be at that full time, because that's who they are. But the plan would be for us to go in and do this, and we would bring with us independent UN body, the IAEA, that deals they're the investigators and the inspectors, for nuclear power. And they have been in Iran many times, headed up by Grassi, who's in charge of it. So they would accompany us in there. And, of course, they have huge knowledge about what is going on inside Iran, but Iran has shut them down a few years ago to having any access whatsoever. So that's kind of the plan. It's labor intensive, to be sure. It would take some time, but understand we fully intended to do this under combat operations. So we have a pretty good feel, for what the scale of this operation would mean in terms of securing a site, excavating, and then the labor intensiveness of just getting it all out of there. So our audience to understand, we did this back in 2003 with Mohammed Gaddafi, who was running Libya. And this is during the Bush administration. And we went in there and took on the development of his nuclear enterprise as well as his chemical weapons, and brought the nuclear stuff back to Oak Ridge, Tennessee, where we have an agency that deals with nuclear power. So, yes, we know how to do this. We've done it in the past. This is a unique situation here, to be sure, because we're doing this under combat conditions. And obviously there would be a ceasefire. But, I mean, we've been fighting a war with them. We were not fighting a war with Gaddafi. He did that after we invaded Iraq, and he thought he would be next. So he voluntarily said that, come and get my stuff, because he didn't want to get into a conflict with us. But, yeah, that would be a good start in these negotiations, Larry, for them to open us up to do something like that. That would mean that they're really serious. And if we could begin with something like that and actually get all of it out of there and be comfortable we've got all of it out of there. After all, this is their crown jewel, and they don't want to give this up. And if they really did give it up to us completely, and we have confidence that it is completely, that would be a major step. I'm skeptical about all of it, but that would prove that we're on a much better path. It remains to be seen if that would be done.
Well, you've said that should be job one, and I was glad to hear the president talk about it a little bit yesterday. But the point is, we're running out of time, but we're just nowhere near that right now. We're nowhere near that. Anyway, I got another commercial break. General Jack Keane, your skepticism is exactly right. That's all I'll say, and thank you for helping us, as you always do with your wisdom. Folks, I'm Kudlow. We'll take a break. On the other side, we're going to do some economics work now. Please stick around. Plenty more to do today.
The Larry Kudlow Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Larry Kudlow Show, entertaining and informative on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
So, one of the key points to the stock market and the economy, which most economists don't understand, so-called demand-siders, is the importance of profits. Profits are the mother's milk of stocks. Profits tell you whether the company's making money or not. And if they're making money, they can hire, they can produce goods and services, and pay wages and help families with their income at the kitchen table. But profits are very, very strong. And that's an important part of the stock market rally, in addition to all the goings-on in the Strait of Hormuz and oil prices and the war. We're still going in the right direction. I mean, the blockade is going to eventually take its toll on Iran. But anyway, let's bring in John Carney, Breitbart news editor for economics and finance and co-author of the Breitbart Business Digest. I happen to know that he snuck a few days off, but I know that he's ready to rock and roll. You know, there's a couple of things I want to talk to you about, John, but one of them is early numbers coming out in the first quarter for profits are really huge, up 30-40%. And that's one of the drivers. But, you know, the model itself is so interesting to me. So economists always start with consumer spending and demand and stuff. They don't look at profits as an economic factor, as an economic growth factor, or as a stock market factor. But they should, because you can't have a healthy business that's not making money.
That's right. You're also not going to hire people, which means people won't have money to spend because they don't have jobs. You're not giving people raises. All of that comes from profits. You're absolutely right. We had a very good the last quarter of 2025, even though the total economic growth, GDP numbers weren't very high. A lot of that had to do with the government shutdown. The profits were good. The numbers now are looking very good for this year. Just the kind of standard Wall Street projection actually is very good. And I think that's actually understating how good things are going to be. I think Morgan Stanley has S&P 500 profits rising 17% in 2026. That's a good number. And I think what we're seeing is actually in a lot of the early returns from just this first quarter, the end of the first quarter, beginning of the second quarter, where we have this Iran war and the Gulf of Hormuz shutdown, it actually doesn't seem to have weighed on the economy very much at all yet, as far as we can tell.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
And it's wrapping up quickly, which is, the Strait of Hormuz is open, as President Trump said it would be, which means that the impact will be very low once that starts flowing through.
Well, we don't know that quite yet because the events this morning, the Iranians start shooting down tankers again. So I don't know whether the Strait of Hormuz is opening up or not, but the bigger point is just how resilient the economy is and how profitable it is, how much productivity it has. Let me ask you another thing. It's in your absence this week, I was interviewing John Yoo, YOO, the lawyer, constitutional lawyer, who I guess worked for George W. Bush. He's out teaching at Berkeley, UCal Berkeley Law School, Bolt Law School. And we're talking about your favorite subject, John, and that is Jay Powell and the Fed and Kevin Warsh, and
right.
Whether Jay will ever be Fed chairman for life. Here's the gist of it. This is you. This is him talking, and he said it on the air. If the Justice Department asks an agency for documents, the agency has to give it to them. Now, in this particular case, there's no criminal charge. They just asked for documents. And the Federal Reserve lawyers continue to refuse to provide the documents. You can't do that. It's part of the executive branch. You've got to pony up what they're asking for. Either that or, find a very good reason not to. And you said that if they continue to withhold these documents, which presumably have to do with the cost overruns, I don't know why that's such a big deal. I don't know what the Fed is hiding. Who knows? But you could fire the head of the agency for cause. In other words, it's not the cost overruns. It's not necessarily a criminal charge. It's the fact that you don't comply with the Justice Department's request for documents that could conceivably allow the president to fire the Fed chairman for cause. The cause here would be disobeying an executive branch order. What do you make of that?
I think that's absolutely right. It's very strange. The Fed seems to be invoking something that has never been invoked before, which is its own version of executive privilege.
Yes.
And that's wrong. They don't have that. The different branches of government have that against each other. So Congress can say some things are privileged against the executive branch or against the judiciary. Judiciary has lots of things that are secret. The executive branch, when Congress asks questions, can say, no, that's part of it. But when you have the executive branch asking the Fed isn't its own constitutional branch of government. It cannot say, no, you don't get to look at our documents. And in fact, the fact that in itself, I think the overreach, the implicit invocation of a non-existent privilege is a good reason to investigate. Why are they? People aren't asking the right questions.
Right.
Because why wouldn't the Fed comply? Why, if they have nothing to hide, and I'm not sure they do, as you said, it's just about cost overruns on a building. Why wouldn't they comply? It doesn't really make sense. It seems maybe it's just Powell's stubbornness. He didn't. But look, there are grown-up lawyers at the Fed. It's not all just Jay Powell. They should have been telling him, hey, look, we should turn this stuff over. They want to look at it. We didn't do anything wrong. Turn it over to them. What are they going to do with it?
John Yoo was saying, next thing you know, the SEC won't comply, the FTC, the Treasury Department. In other words, you'd have complete chaos in the executive branch. You can't do this. And,
that's right.
And no one's charged the Fed with anything. But what are they hiding in these documents? It's the strangest story. That's the principle of it. You follow? It's not about Jay Powell. It's not even about Kevin Warsh. Everybody wants Warsh to get in. It's about the withholding of these documents. And you cannot do that.
How do you hold any branch of government accountable if they say, no, we're not going to, they're going to tell another part of the government we're not going to show it. So you could have, whether it's the national, the Labor Relations Board, the government is full of these boards. The fact that they're trying to say, no, we won't turn over the document. I think John Yoo is right. That is actually a good reason to be able to remove somebody, because frankly, it is as if they are trying to declare themselves. Look, they're independent in a sense, but that just means they get to decide monetary policy without consulting everybody else. It doesn't mean that they get to run themselves completely unaccountably to either the executive or Congress. I think Congress, actually, the Republicans, look, Tom Tillis doesn't like that Jeanine Pirro had sent subpoenas. He should actually hold a hearing and demand all of those documents himself.
Right. That's
the right way to do it.
Senator McCormick, Dave McCormick, said that on the show. Exactly right. Move the investigation to the Senate Banking Committee and explore that right then and there. And that could be an off-ramp for Tillis. That would give him a good sense of, what the story is. And
investigate why they didn't turn it over.
Right.
Like you said, I think this is really important. We want to know the original part, but I also want to know, what were they thinking when they said, no, we're not going to answer these, requests for documents. What was the point there? What was the theory of law that allowed them to stiff arm the Justice Department?
Yep, that's the thing. That's the key thing. Because if they do it, John, everybody will do it. Everybody will do it. Nobody, and you'll have chaos in the executive branch, and you can't have that. Doesn't work that way. Anyway, that's the key point in your absence. So we'll follow up on that when you come back. John Carney, Breitbart News. John's co-author of the daily Breitbart Business Digest, and we will be talking this coming week. Thanks so much, folks. We'll take a break, and then I'm going to talk to former Energy Secretary Dan Brouillette, because the United States is emerging now as the leading energy producer, the most reliable energy producer. We have a new world order in energy as a result of this Iranian war. I'm Kudlow. We'll be right back.
The Larry Kudlow Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Larry Kudlow Show, entertaining and informative on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
One of the offshoots of the Iranian war and this whole shutdown in the Strait of Hormuz, etc., in the Persian Gulf, is that the Middle Eastern oil is no longer reliable. And yes, there are east-west pipelines from Saudi Arabia and other Gulf states, and they may build more, but the fact is it's too easy to blackmail oil. Now, we don't have that problem here in the United States or the Western Hemisphere, and in fact, energy production is growing, not shrinking, and that's could be the new world order. That's what's going to be propelling future oil. It's sort of OPEC for the Americas. Anyway, let's talk to my pal Dan Brouillette, who's a partner and co-chair of Torridon Group. He's a former energy secretary. We worked together in Mr. Trump's first term. Dan, welcome. Thanks for helping out. You've got wonderful things going on with Venezuela and Argentina and perhaps, I think, Guyana. Chevron has to get the rights to Guyana, which could be one of the deepest reservoirs in the world. And we are reliable, right? There's no blackmail. You make a contract, you build a tanker, and we will deliver, quite unlike what's been going on in the Middle East. So this gives us a major leg up to really be, I know we're dominant, but I mean super dominant.
That's right, Larry, super dominant. I like that term. You're absolutely correct. I mean, I think, look, our friend Dan Yergin wrote a book about this. It's called The New Map. And it really does speak to the effects of the development of technologies here in the U.S., like hydraulic fracturing, and the fact that it has put the United States in a now energy-independent posture. We are now able to produce more energy than we actually need. That's why we're able to export. But I would add one more point. Not only are we reliable in the United States because of our production numbers, because of our legal system where we have sanctity of contract, we also do things that no other nation does. And what I mean by that is when you buy natural gas from the United States, when you buy liquefied natural gas, LNG, and it goes onto a ship, it's yours. If you want to resell it on the open market, there are no delivery clauses, no delivery contracts, requirements, I should say, in our contracts. So it's a free enterprise system. And that's what makes our system so much more attractive than some of these other systems you mentioned, the Middle East. For instance, nothing against my friends in Qatar. But if you buy natural gas from Qatar, you have to deliver it where you said you were going to deliver it. You're not allowed to freely trade that on the market. So
I didn't know that.
Approach.
I didn't. So that's like a property rights issue.
Yeah. In many respects. Yeah, but it makes our system and our products and our industry so much more attractive, and that's why I think, to your point, that not only do we have to look at the Middle East a little differently, it may be less reliable. We have to look at the United States as even more attractive, and that's just a fundamental change.
What do you think is the story? China buying all this oil from Iran, and now we're putting an end to that with the blockade. Now, I'm reading, super tankers are pulling into the Gulf of Mexico, the Gulf of America now, to be filled up, presumably, by American operations. But how much of that, how much is China hurt or helped by that? Is there a substitution effect? I mean, it can't be that easy. I mean, I think to some extent we have them over a barrel, not to be too clever, but the fact of the matter is, we don't have all that. We're developing more oil for export, but we have to worry about domestic consumption also and domestic production. In other words, how difficult is it going to be for China to adjust to an era where they're not going to have access to Iranian oil, they're not going to have access to the Strait of Hormuz, they're going to have to deal with the United States?
Well, I think that's true. I mean, if they want to continue any sort of economic growth as we've seen in China over the last 20 years or so, they're going to have to rely on the United States. Because, as you pointed out, U.S. barrels are now the most reliable in the world. There are no choke points, no war risk. You can load a super tanker at scale. And when the market gets nervous, you're going to see more and more buyers come into the Gulf Coast of the United States. And I think that's true for China. I think it's true, obviously, for Asia, other parts of Asia, Japan, Korea in particular, very big importers of U.S. LNG. And I think you're going to start to see as well some additional exports going to Europe. The last couple of days we've learned about a jet fuel crisis in Europe because they were heavily dependent on the Middle East. So I would look for tankers to start lining up in the Gulf Coast of the United States to load up with fuel from refineries and head over to Europe as well.
This gives us phenomenal leverage in trade and foreign policy. And that's going to be part of this, Dan. And I think nobody understands oil politics better than Donald Trump.
Yeah. Well, you saw that firsthand, Larry, when we were in the White House. I mean, we dealt with a different sort of crisis, I guess. Back during the pandemic, we had a demand crash where we were dealing with negative $37 a barrel oil. And, we had some in the Middle East who wanted to use that as an opportunity to push out our shale producers by both raising production and lowering prices even further in the face of a demand crash. And, our production here in the United States at that point was roughly 13, probably 0.3 million barrels per day. And you and I both watched President Trump deal with, the folks in the Middle East, the King of Saudi Arabia. He dealt with Mr. Putin as well very, very effectively because he had such a strong position from which to argue. We had leverage in those conversations that, frankly, no other president before him had because we were an importing nation. And we watched him negotiate those production cuts out of the Middle East and Russia in a way that, again, no other president could have done at that point in time. And it's all due to our industry's ability to produce here in the United States. And that's why things like permitting reform and things like tax structures matter so much. It's the decisions that we make in the moments of peacetime that pay the consequences, or at least give us the dividends, I should say, in these moments, when we need them.
Right. We can do 14, 15, 16 million. I know we can. Plus what we can get from Latin America. Anyway, Dan Brouillette, former Energy Secretary, thank you ever so much. The U.S. has the whip hand on world energy. We'll take a quick break. Ambassador Robert O'Brien, National Security Advisor, coming up next. I'm Kudlow. Please stick around, folks.
The Larry Kudlow Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Larry Kudlow Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
And for some more perspective on the Iran going back on their word and not keeping the Strait of Hormuz open, they hit some of the reports, looks like they hit two ships, fired on two ships near the Gulf of Oman area. But the question is, how much damage is done? You can't believe Iran. The talks have been postponed, perhaps resuming Monday, but they're talking about a new framework for the talks. I don't know. It's all very complicated. It's not as clear-cut as some people hoped yesterday. To shed some light on this, Ambassador Robert O'Brien is here, former National Security Advisor, a very dear friend. He's the chairman of American Global Strategies. I mean, Robert, you just can't believe the Iranians, okay? You just can't believe the Iranians. Now, we had a lot of momentum the last couple of days, and you saw President Trump, and he's talking about it. And the president today said, you're not going to blackmail us. Nothing's going to change, although things have slowed down. How do you see this story?
Look, I'm not surprised, Larry. There are two issues here. The first, the Iranians are liars. They've always lied in negotiations. They stonewall. They do what in real estate law we call it, extend and pretend. They try and run out the clock. That's not going to work here, and I think they've realized that with epic fury and economic fury, which is going to start soon. But number two, there's a lot of uncertainty in the regime. We took out the entire regime at the outset of this campaign. And so they're trying to get look, Iran has politics just like every other country has politics. There's a clerical system, but there's politics going on. So the foreign ministry comes out and cuts a deal, and then the IRGC, the Revolutionary Guards, say they don't like the deal, and they send out some speedboats to attack shipping. So we're going to have to see what happens within the regime. The key thing to realize here, though, is we have all the cards. Total blockade. They can't get any money. They can't get any products. They can't sell their oil. So, look, President Trump has said this. It may take a little bit of time. It may take a week. It may take 2 weeks. It may take 3 weeks. But at the end of the day, we're going to get what we want.
I love that President was insistent yesterday that the blockade would remain in place. We are in control. And I want to see this because I want to starve the regime as much as possible. And this will succeed. And they're going to have to wind up shuttering their oil fields very, very soon because they don't have storage capacity there. And Jack Keane was on earlier. General Keane was on earlier saying the same thing you mentioned. Who's in charge here? You know, you got your general, you got your Islamic guard, but then you've got civilians from the parliament. I mean, I don't know who's running that place.
Well, no one knows, and I don't think they know in Iran who's running the place. So you got, they're all clerics. The guard, the parliamentarians, the foreign ministry, they're all mullahs, and they've got their own internal fights going on about who's in charge. But I think the other thing is that in addition to the blockade, the president last week, and it did not get a lot of play, turned Scott Bessent loose on him. And man, I would not want to have Scott Bessent on my case. That guy's a tough guy. He's a smart guy, and he launched Operation Economic Fury, playing off the military campaign of being Epic Fury. And with Economic Fury, he said he's going to track down every Ghost bank account, every IRGC regime, Ayatollah bank account in the world, and shut them down. So the Iranians are under a heck of a lot of pressure right now. Make
sure all these bank accounts are frozen. UAE, Qatar, right? That's what you're talking about.
Yes, I mean he's talking about draining them, not just freezing them. So we'll have to see what happens. But I mean, don't get on Scott Bessent's bad side.
Right. But that's an important point because they have a lot of arrangements, in the Gulf states, which are big banking areas, Abu Dhabi, so forth. So that's a very important point. But the generic point is the blockade is going to, starve them out economically and financially. I'm in no rush. You know what I mean? I don't want to make it a quick deal. I want to keep it going for a month, 2 months. This is the ultimate solution, is it not?
Look, the old saying is the Iranians have never won a battle, but they've never lost a negotiation. Oh. And this kind of they're going to lose in negotiation because President Trump is very transparent. We've talked about this many times, Larry. And you've seen this. And we need to go back to what he said at the beginning of the crisis when he sent Witkoff and Kushner to Geneva. He said, number one, they had three things he demanded of the Iranians: give up your nukes, give up your missile program, and stop supplying your proxies, Hezbollah and Hamas and the Houthis. And others. Well, he's staying tough on the nukes. He said you've got to turn over all the uranium powder, the enriched uranium, and apparently the Iranians agreed to that, but now they're backing down. He destroyed the missile factory, so that goal is accomplished. And if you look at the proxies, Hamas is totally cut off down in Gaza, and Hezbollah is a troublemaker, but Lebanon sat down for peace talks last week with Marco Rubio and Israel. That unprecedented peace talks between Lebanon and Israel. So that really sidelines Hezbollah. So President Trump is going to achieve his three main goals here. Whether the mullahs and ayatollahs like it or not.
When is that? When you talk about the peace talks between Lebanon and Israel, does that include Hezbollah?
It does not.
Right.
And
right.
Hezbollah is not happy about that. Like if the Lebanese government and the Israelis get together, the two of them can disarm Hezbollah.
So what role does Iran play in this? This is important because remember, Iran said yesterday that they would open the Strait of Hormuz. They're going to open the Strait of Hormuz while there's a ceasefire between Israel and Lebanon, negotiate. But they didn't mention Hezbollah, and I didn't understand. It seemed like it was like nitpicking. It seemed like it was, they were attaching a conditionality to it.
Well, look, Hezbollah is their key ally. Mm-hmm. The Shias in Lebanon, and it's their key method of putting pressure on Israel and striking Israel. Hezbollah has basically captured the Lebanese state up until very recently. And so when Iran talks about Lebanon, they're talking about Hezbollah.
Right.
But what's happened is with the Iranians' brilliant campaign, with the Israelis' brilliant campaign against Hezbollah and the Iranians in Lebanon, Hezbollah has a lot less power. And so the Lebanese government is moving to reassert its control. It's not certain, and it's very fragile right now. But Lebanon is trying to free itself from this Iranian yoke and from the terrorist regime of Hezbollah. And if they can do that, then that's going to be a huge win for the people of Lebanon and a huge win for the people of Israel.
So that just means if we shut them down financially and shut the banking down, I love the banking shutdown, the Scott Besson piece, they can't help Hezbollah. Hezbollah's left dangling. Israel can take care of that whole story. Maybe once and for all, Robert.
100%. I mean, Hezbollah without money is
right.
Worthless.
Right. I like that. I like that very much. I hadn't really thought about that. I bet you, Scott, it's interesting, the IMF meetings in New York, in Washington, I wonder, Scott may have gone to work on some of these banking relationships, Scott Besson. I got to track him down and find out what he can and cannot do. But chances are we have a lot of leverage over all these countries right now and their banking system. We could keep him out of our bank. We can keep him out of the SWIFT system. Remember, you and I talked about this months and months and months ago. We have plenty of leverage over them.
Well, and we have leverage over the allies of China and Russia and the Gulf states with secondary sanctions as well. So, we can basically tell people to back off Iran and cut them off. Well,
Iran was kind of uppity this morning, but I don't think the momentum is going to stop. We've got the upper hand. The boss is going in the right direction. He's got him on the run, no question about it.
They're on the ropes, and President Trump is not going to let them off the ropes, and they're going to comply. It's just a question of if it's this week, next week, or next month. Well,
let's take our time. Let's just drain them. That's what I like to do. Anyway, folks, Ambassador Robert O'Brien, former National Security Advisor. He's now the chairman of American Global Strategies. I am his student, Kudlow. We'll take a break, and on the other side, we're going to talk to Greg Jarrett about impeachments. I'm Kudlow. Please stick around.
The Larry Kudlow Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Larry Kudlow Show. Entertaining and informative on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
So there's a wonderful story developing, and we shined a bit of light on it on the TV show last night with Senator Schmidt of Missouri. But my old friend Greg Jarrett turned out to be completely right. DNI Tulsi Gabbard, Director of National Intelligence, declassified a bunch of documents that showed and sent criminal referrals, I might add, to the Justice Department, aimed at unraveling this whole phony Ukrainian impeachment business years ago, where it turns out whistleblowers were really nothing more than Democratic operatives inside the intelligence deep state. And Greg Jarrett has been writing about this for years, including his book. And we've got my friend Greg Jarrett, Fox News legal analyst, and the author of any number of books. So, Greg, you are completely vindicated here, and I wanted to give you some open field run. This is very cool. She declassified everything and then sent over a criminal referral. It couldn't be any clearer than that.
Yeah, you're right, Larry. These declassified documents, hidden for 7 years, prove that, Trump was set up. He was framed by people in the intel community who were conspiring with Democrats like Adam Schiff to manufacture a phony impeachment. The whistleblower was never a whistleblower at all under the meaning of the statute. I wrote about it while it was happening. The formal complaint that he filed against Trump should never have been sent to Congress because it was based on triple and double hearsay. It didn't even qualify as a valid complaint under the law and under Department of Justice rules. It never involved intelligence. Not only that, the whistleblower law doesn't even apply to the president, who, of course, was the target of the complaint. All of that was ignored. Even worse, it turns out the whistleblower was a partisan mole with close ties to Joe Biden. He was an undercover operative from the CIA who was determined to engineer this fraudulent impeachment, and, he got caught along the way and actually apologized for his deceit. But the apology was covered up. And, during these proceedings 7 years ago, as I say, I wrote numerous columns, talked about it on air, pointing all of this out, but these newly declassified documents prove it.
Didn't we talk about this on this show?
We did.
I mean, I sort of, as I was reading all this, it sort of was vaguely familiar. Anyway, the president's not an intelligence operative. He's not part of the intelligence community. He's directs it. He's not part of it. I mean, I didn't understand. I never understood that part. Anyway, to unravel some more, where's this going to lead? There's a criminal referral here, which is very interesting to me. Can we follow through on this?
We can and should, and the DOJ, I am convinced, will do so. And the two targets are the whistleblower, who still hasn't been officially identified. We all know who it is. And by the way, under law, he's not afforded anonymity. That's another canard. But look, the other individual that is the target of the criminal referral is Michael Atkinson, who was at the time the Inspector General for the intelligence community. He's identified in the new documents as aiding and abetting this fake whistleblower who submitted false information and lies in his complaint against Trump. And Atkinson knew it, but he covered it up. He vouched for the man's credibility, even though he knew he was deceitful. And thereafter, Atkinson concealed exculpatory evidence that would have cleared Trump. That's the most insidious part of it. The whistleblower's bias and deceit was deliberately hidden from Congress, the American people, and importantly, Trump's defense team. Atkinson exceeded his authority. He weaponized the whistleblower process. And, of course, Adam Schiff was all in on it from the very beginning. Schiff propelled the Trump impeachment, even though he knew the truth, but he remained silent about it, and he joined the conspiracy. His staffers actually coordinated with a whistleblower before the whistleblower even wrote his complaint. So they were all working together to get Trump. Trump was set up for a sham impeachment led by Adam Schiff and Nancy Pelosi. It should never have happened. It was a farce.
So I don't, without evidence, I'm not the lawyer, I'm not the prosecutor, but I still believe that the Biden family business with Burisma was corrupt. Absolutely corrupt. I mean,
totally.
Papa Biden, Junior Biden, all their little friend Bidens. I mean, we never really buttoned any of that. Greg, it's sort of like it faded away with the election and so forth. The Oversight Committee, they did what they could, but they didn't really finish their work. I mean, this comes under the heading of unfinished business, but I tell you, there's a lot of unfinished business that could be uncovered.
Yeah, I agree entirely. And, there's a grand jury that is poised to issue some indictments down in Florida for an overarching grand conspiracy to frame Donald Trump, to weaponize the law against him. And I would keep a close watch on what that grand jury is doing. Keep watching it over the next few weeks. There's a new guy coming in to take over that, and I think you could see some indictments.
What about this guy, the so-called Inspector General? Can they go after him? Michael
absolutely.
Atkinson? Yeah.
Sure. I mean, and I identify in my column, I invite your listeners to read it on foxnews.com, and I identify the crimes committed. And they include everything from false statements and perjury to conspiracy to defraud the government and obstruction of Congress as well. So, keep a watch on that. The FBI and the DOJ are digging deep into it.
Basically, to oversimplify, Trump told Zelensky, this is before the Russia war and so forth, to take a look at this stuff. Just take a look at it. Because you got, one bad actor after another. Ukraine known for this. That's really all that ever happened.
And the president has Article 2 power under the Constitution to do that. He can request of foreign leaders information. There was nothing at all inappropriate about that phone call,
right?
Because there was already a criminal investigation into Hunter Biden and his dad's complicity in, corrupt influence peddling schemes. So it's ludicrous to think that that's grounds for impeachment, and yet it happened.
President, it's part of this Article 2 stuff, which is so important. The president also has under Article 2 of the Constitution, the chief executive has sweeping authority to conduct foreign affairs, negotiate with leaders of other nations, and make requests or solicit information. Okay?
Yeah.
You're writing. Now, the Federal Reserve Board thing goes under this. The Federal Reserve Board has been requested by the Justice Department, right, representing the president, to give documentation to their cost overruns, and they won't do it. And we had John Yoo on. John, lawyer from California.
Yeah, I saw your interview. Great interview with John Yoo.
Yeah, I mean, there's cause here. There's cause for firing, not because of overruns, not because of stupidity or bad monetary policy, but they are violating what happens in the executive branch.
That's right. Powell has to abide by instructions and requests, and you and John are right. It is a for-cause dismissal.
Okay. Well, Greg, you're back in business, buddy. I'm so happy we can revisit this week after week. This is fabulous stuff. Keep it coming. Folks, Greg Jarrett, nobody better, Fox News legal analyst, terrific story. We will take a break. And then on the other side, we're going to do some stock market work. Boy, there's a good story. American stocks are melting up. I'm Kudlow. Stay with us.
The Larry Kudlow Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Larry Kudlow Show. Entertaining and informative on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Well, we got lots of positive things to talk about regarding the stock market. My goodness. It's almost a melt-up. Actually, it's been going on for a couple of weeks. Part of it, of course, is we're moving in the right direction to crush Iran. We will, before long, get rid of what I call the most gruesome regime since the Nazis of the 1930s and 40s, and do the whole world a favor. And hats off to President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu and their respective militaries and intelligence agencies. We've talked about that quite a bit in the show. Probably talk about it some more. But we're in the right direction. But the other point is the profit story that we were talking about earlier with John Carney. I mean, profits of the mother's milk of stocks. And I think that has a lot to do with this rally. Also, you just can't keep a good market down. Dow Jones is up 1,500 points plus. NASDAQ's up 1,500 points plus. The S&P is up 300 points. S&P is at a record high, 71.26. And I think Taylor told us last night the NASDAQ's the highest since the early 1990s, which is very cool. And the Dow's going to hit 50,000. It's 49,447. So we're cruising, and the market is quite resilient. The economy is quite resilient, and profits are quite resilient. So let's get to it. We got Jack Perusians, chairman of SmartX Data, Jim Urio, CEO of, what is this, JI Financial Strategies? Did you rename your company? Is that?
I did, yeah. You like it?
It's wild, yeah. Branding is fantastic.
Branding, that's what I'm doing, yeah.
Absolutely terrific stuff. Just looking at this stuff, guys, before you dig in, tech led the way, surprisingly. Tech up 8%. Consumer discretionary 6.5%, telecom 6.5%, and the bottom was energy, lost 3.5%. Oil prices start coming back down. Crude oil WTI lost $12 and closed at 84.69. So, Jim Urio, the aforementioned, with your new branding, how do you read this market right now?
So I'm impressed by something that I think the stock market, all the markets were relatively pragmatic through this whole thing. They were saying most of the time, okay, there's a problem. Crude oil is spiking. If it feeds into inflation, the Fed is painted in a corner. But I think something materially changed 2 weeks ago, right before the NFP number. Remember, we were all up in arms because of the markets, is because they thought the Fed couldn't ease because of the inflation high crude was causing, and the Fed couldn't tighten to handle that inflation if it wasn't temporary because the labor market was weakening. And then a couple things happened that changed the whole story. The unemployment numbers came out relatively blockbuster at 178. Now, I know some people don't 100% give credence to the government data, but it's usually directionally correct. So all of a sudden, the one of the legs of the stagflation fear was taken off the table. So the stock market started to feel a little better. And then all of a sudden, the crude story came down. And one last thing about the crude story is that there's obviously different pundits who are poisoned somehow. Like some people have been broken by Donald Trump. Some are too devoted to Donald Trump. The real story was very, very difficult to get. So the price action of crude was the only thing telling the story. On Wednesday of last week at $95, to me, that was saying 50-50 that this thing is over in 3 weeks. But crude at 85 and lower is saying it's 90-10 that it's over right now. So right now it's certainly euphoric, and I'm a bull.
Where's the the year ahead futures, Jim, is about $70?
Yeah, some of them ticked below $70. But again, that can be read two ways. And yes, there's an element that the crude oil curve was saying that it was going to be a short-lived conflict. But more important than that was the short ends, panic and demand for supply. So it kind of obfuscates that signal. But embedded in that signal was that the market always thought that it was going to be short-lived, and so did I, by the way. That was always my base case.
What's Jeff Brugian, what's the break even, the marginal cost of producing an extra barrel of oil? Is it somewhere in the low mid 60s?
No, it depends on who you are. If you're an Arab country, it's about 65 is what they've budgeted for all their budgets. One of the reasons that gold was going down because they were liquidating gold to make sure that they made up for some of those losses.
Oh, that's a good point. Right.
But if you're here in the Western Hemisphere, that number is a lot lower, and that is the real story with oil, Larry. Nobody's talking about the other side of this coin, which is going to be the deflationary pressure that we see on the markets when we start to see oil work its way down under 60, under 50. These are the numbers that I can see happening within a year from now. Now, as far as the stock market goes, remember, the market is immune right now, not only to the oil shock, because it's really a rounding error in the long run, especially when we're starting to see, because we all know what we're seeing on here in the U.S. We know that we are the world's largest producer. This is not the 1970s anymore. So all of that now has been factored into the equation. On top of that, we're going through the biggest CapEx boom that we've ever seen and witnessed. You're seeing data centers springing up everywhere. That is not stopping. When the market does what it did, when you see a V-shaped recovery like that, it tells you that it was mispriced. The way it acted and the way it came back tells you two things. Number one, people were underinvested at the end of that first quarter. People were sitting on a lot of cash. Number two, all right, they started to see the real story, which is that earnings are still strong.
That's it.
You're starting to see what's happening. And you were mentioning the S&P. You were mentioning the NASDAQ. The Russell made a new high. So that's key. The Russell made a new all-time high. And on top of that, and nobody's even talking about this, nat gas is back down to $2.67. All right? It spiked all the way up to $7 just about 4 or 5 weeks ago. It is now back down to where it was in 2024, and that is what drives data centers.
Well, so oil is getting cheaper, gas is getting cheaper, but profits are the mother's milk of stocks. The early profit numbers coming in for Q1 are very big. Taylor Riggs, from Fox Business Network, was on the show last night. I think she said the first 10%, 12% of companies reporting profits are up 30%. That's a big number. The GDP profits, national income profits are up 10% year on year at the end of last year. I know that's a lagging indicator, but there's a lot of evidence. And if profits are doing well, the stock market and the economy will be resilient. I just want to make that point. Everybody looks this is aimed at Jim Uriel because I know he reads the news.
I hate being one of three guys who are all this positive. I'm about to change my tune to negative.
I know you read the newspapers a lot, and it worries me because you pick up bad habits. But the fact of the matter is, it is profits that drive stocks, and it is profits that drive the whole economy. That's all. If there's no profits, you're going to shrink your business. You're going to lay off workers. Incomes will come down. Families can't spend. But you're looking at a boom in profits. And that's just so darn important. And we're going to wipe these Iranian mulls off the face of the earth, whether it's this week or next week or 3 weeks or whatever. We've already established that. But it's more fun to look at and the other thing is, the impact of the tax cuts. Look, this stuff really started kicking in. Right? April 15th.
You're taking all my stuff away.
Sorry.
I was about to mention.
Go ahead. Well, you rebranded your company. I wanted to make sure.
Do I sound smarter since I
much
rebranded?
better?
I think I do.
A whole lot better.
So at the beginning of this year, I was very bullish to the economy. I think that the average tax refund for people is about 12%, and that's not even the biggest deal. I thought the expensing issue was going to be a massive tailwind to the economy, as was the deregulation effort, as was reinvestment. Again, we've all known Donald Trump, and he's been in the spotlight for a long time. He is prone to a bit of exaggeration. If he says that $25 trillion has been recommitted to investment in the United States, and let's say that it's only 6 or 7,
call it 10, right? That's big.
Exactly, I'm saying it's still a significant amount.
Right.
So people are like, "Oh, he's crazy." Well, I don't care what number he throws out. I care what the real story is, and the real story is good. Now, it was obvious that Kudlow could have thrown us into a bit of a tizzy, and now and again, I will mention this too. And again, I'm just joking about being three, positive guys, but I will say there's one thing that it's very slight concern. Crude at 83 to 85 is still pricing in a risk premium. There's no question about that. So it's saying that we are pretty sure that things are going to go good. And again, we could get a curveball from there, but I don't believe we will. That is not my base case. I'd like to see the stock market come back.
Well, there'll be ups. You're right. Yeah. Look, this story will have its ups and downs in the weeks ahead, but we're coming down the home stretch. One thing I want to ask before we take a break, Jack Bruggen, the yield curve is upward sloping. I got T-bills at 368. I got 2 years at 370. All right, that's kind of flat. 5 years at 584, and 10 years at 424, and then 30 years at 488. And that's okay. I don't see that. I mean, I don't know why the Federal Reserve has to do anything right now. I guess that's what I'm like. The market doesn't need it. The economy doesn't need it. We got controversy over the Fed head anyway. But why not? Rates are what they are.
Well, I think the Fed right now has got the handcuffs on between what's happening with, in Iran. But more importantly, Larry, I think you're wrong. And I'm going to just say that. I'd never say that, but I'm going to say it this time.
Terrible.
You know what? I think that we're seeing that yield curve way too flat, right? Especially the front end of that yield curve. It's telling us that the Fed is too tight, all right? It's one of the reasons why we should see a little bit more of a curve in the yield curve. That's why they call it a curve, all right? Right now, you're not getting paid for any difference between 3 months and 2 years. That is ridiculous. That is absolutely ridiculous. And I'll defer to Jim on this, whenever he can talk about it. But to me, that is a clear statement that the Fed has got room to move on the short end.
Yeah, but I don't want them. Here's the thing, though. Even though oil prices come down, you're still $85. So I don't want the Fed pumping money supply into the economy right now. In other words, wait.
It's not a question of pumping money. It's a question of what the real rate is, Larry. What's the real market rate without it being manipulated? And that right now, the yield curve is telling you that the real rate on the short end should be lower.
I'm not convinced of that. I don't know. The actual, here, growing up in the 70s, the Fed would start cutting rates and increasing the money supply when oil prices went up. And oil inflation became generalized inflation. I want to avoid that this time around. And they've done a good job. I think I give them credit. They've done a good job. This is not the time to move. The curve's not inverted. You're right, it's flat at the short end. I agree. But nonetheless, by the way, bond rates, everything came down. Let's see, 2-year note down 10, 5-year note down 10, 10-year note down 7. How low can rates go? How low can the 10-year go?
I think the 10-year can get down. Well, I'll give you my answer first. I think it can get down under 4%. Really? I don't know what Jimmy thinks, and I think it's because people are buying everything that is U.S. dollar denominated, and you can see it across the board.
So much supply too, though, Jack. That's the part that worries me too. When yields shot up to 4.44 after the war broke out, to me it wasn't about inflation. It was about just the amount of bonds that need to be sold to cover our debt, adding on the war part of it. Now the war part of it's gone, but that still leaves us with 11 or 12 trillion, with the 9 trillion we have to roll over and the 2 trillion to satisfy the deficits. There's a lot of bonds to be sold. So I think 410 is reasonable on the downside, and I think 470. If we ever get to 475 on the upside, that's when the Fed comes back and starts buying, which I think is a terrible move. I bet they do.
Debt is as American as apple pie. We are talking to Jack Barusian of SmartX Data and Jim Urio of JI Financial Services. I'm Kudlow. We'll be right back.
The Larry Kudlow Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Larry Kudlow Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
And we're talking profits and we're talking interest rates, but most of all, we're talking fabulous couple of weeks of stocks, really record-breaking weeks. It's good for the animal spirits. A lot of people own stocks one way or another. Maybe as many as 140, 150 million Americans, depending on which survey you look at. We are talking to two great friends of mine, Jack Barusian of SmartX Data and Jim Urio, the CEO of JI Financial Strategies. So where from here? I mean, you can't bet against it, can you, Jim?
No, I'm not. I'm definitely not buying against it. I think with the magnitude of the move we've seen over the last week, I do think it pulls back for a better spot for me to buy it, but I'm definitely a bull. I'd like to see it come back below those old highs, gather some steam, and then shoot higher. To me, from a technical analysis standpoint, again, and people listening think that technical analysis is just voodoo lines on a chart, but to me, it's sentiment and momentum. And if it comes back a little bit, I'll probably get in and buy it. I'm looking at copper, I'm looking at gold, I'm looking at the XLF, the financials. So I think those all could be not tech. Tech just moves so far, so fast. I feel like I missed that rocket ship on this particular move.
What's Dr. Copper doing? It's pretty. Let's see. Dr. Copper year to date is up 6%. 52-week change is up 24%. And CRB year to date is up 21%. Now, I know a lot of that's oil, and it's up 22%. But the commodities, Jack Barusian, what are they doing?
They're under control, Larry. You know what? If it wasn't for oil, we wouldn't even be talking about any inflationary pressure right now. If you look at the grains, if you look at everything else, they're all under control. It's one of the reasons why I've got a feeling this year is going to surprise some people. I think what we've experienced over the course of these last 2 weeks might be indicative of what we see over the course of the next few months. And, it's almost going to be a replay of last year. If you remember last April, we were on the show together and people were talking doomsday scenarios again. You know what? The Trump tariffs are going to drive this market to zero. All right. And what happened? We rallied 40%. Well, guess what? We just saw another 10% break, 9% or so in the S&P. I would not be surprised to see us back around the 83 to 8,500 level by the end of the year when we're talking. And that is something that will catch a lot of people flat-footed.
Boy, the Kudlow Trust will love that. I'm loaded up at the index. I never sell it. I only buy it. I think it's fabulous. It's a great country, fellas. I mean, honestly. And the policies are very pro-growth. They're not redistribution. They're not big government socialism. They're not perfect either. I get that. But the thrust of the policies are what? Tax cuts, deregulation, drill baby drill, reciprocal fair trade. It's a pretty good story. I know Mr. Trump's critics will never acknowledge that, but it's a pretty damn good story. Isn't that what the stock market's telling you, fellas? I mean, really?
Well, it's actually a page out of Milton Friedman's book. It's the twin miracle, the economic and political miracle simultaneously, and we're starting to see it play out in real time.
And it's catching on.
I agree with everything you said. I want to find fault in everything.
Well, it's just, look, it's improving in South America. It's improving in Latin America. Who knows? It may improve in the Middle East, too, if we're lucky and blessed about it. You two are terrific. Thank you ever so much, Jack Barusian and Jim Urio. Folks, we will take a quick break and then do some money in politics. Steve Forbes and ace pollster John McLaughlin. I'm Kudlow. Please stick around.
The Larry Kudlow Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Larry Kudlow Show, entertaining and informative on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
So now we should think about a couple things. Number one, can we get one big beautiful bill that has even more economic power? We talked about it with Senate Majority Leader John Thune on the TV show this week, and Ted Cruz. And the second point is about the midterms. It's all about the midterms, I guess. Does America back Trump in the war? I believe it will. I believe it's going to be one of the big sleeper issues. Is how well, once this thing's over, and we're coming down the home stretch, the most wonderful thing, we'll get rid of the worst, most gruesome regime since the Nazis of the 1930s and 40s. That remains my view. We're on the right track. There'll be bumps on the road, but we're on the right track. Almost a Trumpian miracle. And that's what the stock market's been telling us, among other things. Anyway, let's bring in our two great guests. The great Steve Forbes, dear friend, chairman, editor-in-chief of Forbes Media. And Steve's latest book is Inflation, What It Is, Why It's Bad, and How to Fix It. And John McLaughlin, pollster extraordinaire, CEO of McLaughlin and Associates. Gentlemen, thank you for doing this. Appreciate it. John, I didn't read it, but your poll suggests that the voters are indeed backing Mr. Trump on the Iranian war.
Yes, and it's actually gotten stronger over the last month because we just came out of the field this week on Thursday, and 1,000 likely voters, do they support the military action to stop Iran from getting nuclear weapons? 52-40 they do. Do they think that the actions he's done were warranted and justified to protect American lives? 59-32, all voters do. And do they agree or disagree that Mr. Trump needs to finish the job? 60-30 they do. So public opinion is with him. And by the way, the big thing about that is 79% is April 1st address that you certainly encouraged, where he addressed the nation. 79% of all voters either saw news reports about it or actually watched it. 32% actually watched it. The ones who watched it, 67% to 29% support him, because their number one reason, 6 out of 10 say the reason he's doing this is to stop Iran from getting nuclear weapons. So the American public is thinking ahead and saying, we can't let this terrorist state have nuclear weapons because they'll use them against us. And they said 61-20 that if Iran got nuclear weapons, they would use it against the United States allies and our military bases.
This was the Steve Forbes speech. For weeks, yeah. Steve Forbes hammered, give a speech, give a speech. So you're saying he gave the speech, and those who saw the speech really liked it.
Yes, and they understood the reason for it, because the mainstream media, if they get it from the legacy anti-Trump deranged media, they think this is about either taking the oil or regime change, and that's not what it's about. It's about stopping them from getting nuclear weapons that they'll use against Americans. And Steve would know it because we were talking earlier, and he ran Radio Liberty for Ronald Reagan.
Yep.
He got out the truth to Iranian people when Reagan was president. So Steve knows.
Well, I think I still believe, Steve, that the Democrats have made an enormous mistake in almost unilaterally opposing this war. And it really isn't about Trump's per se. This was the point. I'll go back to David Boies' op-ed piece, famous defense lawyer in the Wall Street Journal. He doesn't like Donald Trump either, but he favors destroying Iran and understood clearly that Iran was a nuclear threat and a terrorist threat to the United States and everybody else in the world. So what David Boies said is Democrats should be supporting the military action, but they are opposing everything because of their Trump derangement. And I think it's going to really backfire in November.
It's going to be an issue, and the thing to keep in mind, and you hit the nail on the head right there, is that it's one thing to say that we should have done more of this or less of that, but quite another to, because they hate Trump, oppose measures to secure the security of the United States. The first obligation of a president or any head of a country is national security, and that's what we have here. And now that we find that the Iranian regime is in apparent disarray, the IRGC is apparently calling the shots at the moment. I think we have to prepare ourselves as part of this campaign for the possibility that we may have to resume hostilities. The Israelis and we have 10 days of targets left. We know what we need to do. And if the public, I think, if the president does another address as he did before, when people listen to it, as John pointed out, they're persuaded this is about our future security. I think they'll back him up. But it will also tell the Iranian regime is we have to get rid of the IRGC and their local militias. And as you've pointed out in the past, the army there is made up of conscripts. This is the army, and you have a lot of officers there who are not part of this fanatical regime. And we've got to create conditions where they can actually make a move and have a regime change. I know that's a bad word, regime change, but where you can actually sit down and have a negotiation and know you're going to get somewhere.
Well, I keep waiting for the regular army to emerge. It hasn't yet, or perhaps it hasn't. We don't know about it. You know, both General Jack Keane and former National Security Advisor Robert O'Brien on the show today, both of them talked about the confusion about who, quote unquote, who's running the place. And you're getting mixed signals. And so it's very difficult to sort through. I agree with you. If combat is necessary, it will be taken. But one thing that President Trump is insisting on is the blockade will remain in place for a long time. And I just think that's key.
And that's absolutely essential. Right. And the other thing, we've discussed this before, he should announce, is that Saudi Arabia and others are going to go forward with new pipeline projects that will bypass the Strait of Hormuz. They've got a couple already, but within a few months, maybe 12 months, even with some Iranian missiles perhaps hitting them from time to time, they can create pipelines where most of the oil that now moves through the Strait of Hormuz can go through these pipelines, and therefore that will tell Iran your days of having any kind of chokehold is over. Those days are numbered.
You know, Steve,
get those pipelines going.
Another thing that came up today in these discussions is from Scott Besson is on the warpath for bank accounts, not only freezing them, but maybe just, absconding with them. You've got all these relationships, right? Banks in Qatar and UAE, and Iran's been doing business there, but I think he's trying to sweep through all of that. Anybody that doesn't play ball you're off the SWIFT system. You're off the New York Fed wire. You're just you're out there, and that's
and
powerful weapon.
Since Iran has been bombing these places, pouring missiles on them, they're going to be open to moving against those assets, and that'll be another thing. The bad guys will know if they don't get out now, they're going to lose everything.
But John McLaughlin, why that? I mean, your numbers are just they're wonderfully different. But they are different than the run-of-the-mill YouGov and Siena and New York Times. And, you see this routinely. The Wall Street Journal, which I look at the front page in the morning, and they'll always say, polls show how unpopular this war is, that kind of thing. And you're saying it's just not true.
The American media that's on the left, that's anti-Trump, they really have become the Iranian state media in the U.S. And our polls that we posted, it's on our website, McLaughlinOnline.com, and it was in our Newsmax blog, and so it's out there. We fully disclose this. I mean, in the same poll I'm talking to you about, where there's this public support for President Trump for what he's doing in Iran. At the same time, the Republicans are losing the generic vote to the Democrats by 4 points, and that's more related to the economy. But on Iran, the public sees it, and Trump addressed them directly, because the Iranians, the problem we got with it, there's two types of Iranian terrorists we're dealing with. those who are lying, and those who are going to lie. And what we ought to do is, we've seen it here in America, when President Trump addresses the public directly, the American people get it, and he did an exceptional job with the speech that you and Steve both encouraged him to do. But what he should do is, we live in an information age where the media is fragmented and the governments really can't control this stuff, but they try. He should open the internet in Iran, and he ought to speak directly to the Iranian people to let them know what's going on.
How do you do? You need Starlink. You need Starlink,
right?
Yeah,
but do it and allow the information to get there. By the way, our polls, the polls you were talking about, the fake media polls, they poll adults. Not all registered voters, not even likely voters. Right. And they also underpoll Trump voters. That YouGov Economist poll is constantly, the people who say they voted for Trump in 2024, where we got 50% of the popular vote, they constantly have it like 35, 36%. And now the midterm elections in the U.S. will be a function of turning out Trump voters. There were 156 million voters who voted in 2024. Trump got 77 million.
But who are these adults? They're polling adults. I don't understand the word adult. What does that mean? Could be anybody. You don't have to be a citizen. You're not right. Exactly. Right. Who are these adults?
It's a random.
And I know a lot of adults that aren't even adults. So I'm just saying I don't understand this. Yeah. I never. By the way, I got to give Forbes credit. Look, Forbes mouthed me into the speech. I was not really. I said, let him just make his quip. Steve said, no. And Steve was right. He gave the speech. And the speech probably worked. Look, it's a miracle going on here. This thing, I come back to this, even without polls. I'm telling you, when you look at this thing, whenever it's over, we're winning, and we're going to win. Trump is the greatest, strongest leader we've seen, and probably since World War II. All right? And we loved Reagan. I love Reagan. But what he's done here is remarkable. And he's done it with Israel, so it's kind of FDR and Churchill. Right? These are Nazis. These are the most gruesome people. These threaten nobody in America likes no one in America likes Iran except the adults from the Siena poll. They're the only ones that like Iran. Everyone else in America hates Iran. What they're worried about was we might have to have 300,000 troops with huge casualties, and the oil price would go to 300. That's what once they see that we've done this in a bit more efficient way, including the blockade to squeeze them financially and bleed them, starve the regime, they're going to say, bravo. This is the biggest mistake the Democratic Party has made in I don't know how long. It's extraordinary. Go ahead, fire away. Tell me why I'm wrong.
I don't think you're wrong, but it's up to the Republicans to play offense. I mean, President Trump, to his credit, he gave a wonderful State of the Union where he stuck to the script, and he drew a contrast in a positive speech. He drew a contrast with the Democrats on deporting criminal illegals, on being a stronger America, on economic growth, on taxes. And then, we go to war with Iran, so the whole national agenda changes. But then he gives a direct address to the American people, and we get these stronger numbers. And his job approval went up too in my poll. Oh. And we got to grind up where we have to keep doing this. And right now he's been running the government, doing a fantastic job. Whether it's economic growth with the tax cuts, but they're not getting the message out.
All right, let me take a break. Because it's a fabulous conversation, but we're running out of time. The great Steve Forbes and ace pollster John McLaughlin. We're going to come right back. You guys just take a quick break. I'm Kudlow. We'll be back.
The Larry Kudlow Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Larry Kudlow Show. Entertaining and informative on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
And we've got the great Steve Forbes, Chairman and Editor-in-Chief, Forbes Media, ace pollster John McLaughlin, who talks to adults. No, he talks to likely adults. Much better. So, Steve Forbes, I had a long talk on the air with John Thune, Senate Majority Leader John Thune. And we talked about a big wide-bodied bill with maybe indexing capital gains and waste, fraud, and abuse and voting rights, things we've been talking about, economic growth type bill. But there is a difference. And now here's the debate as I see it. And then we had Ted Cruz on. Cruz is very much in our camp. Cruz has one bill. You'll never get two through the House. No skinny bill for DHS, even though we want to put the DHS money in the one big beautiful bill. But it's like the argument last year. One bill. Thune wants two bills. I think Speaker Johnson does too, but I have not spoken to him, Steve. So everybody's probably Ted Cruz is Tommy Tuberville too. They had the clearest vision of what we want to do. But I think it's going to be a big push. So far, the president hasn't particularly weighed in. I think he would take the DHS money, for ICE and the Customs Bureau and so forth. But he hasn't focused on it yet. So that's the state of play. I did the best I could with Thune. We went back and forth. And he was open to a large bill, but he thinks we can get two bills. I don't.
No, trying to get one bill through, we should have learned from last year how difficult that was, right. What a miracle that was on the big, beautiful bill. Why try to undo that experience and have two failures instead of getting one bill through? And you're right, there should be tax cuts in that bill, especially income tax rate cuts, so people in the fall see their paychecks go up even if they don't get a pay raise. Index capital gains, reduce capital gains. And one of the things Treasury should do, for Secretary Besson, there goes back to the 1990s, is there a body of law that says they can be indexed by a ruling from the federal government. You don't have to get it through Congress. Never do it. And they never have the backbone to do it. Yeah. So put it in the bill and do it.
Yeah, that's the way to go.
And the other thing they should push through immediately, and looks like the Federal Reserve has stumbled on this when they resisted those subpoenas, thinking they're a fourth branch of government, is get out and wash in, because the Federal Reserve is going to make some big mistakes in coming months unless they get reform and understand that a vibrant economy is not bad.
So, Steve Forbes, here's something, and maybe McLaughlin polls on this. When Ronald Reagan left Washington, there were two tax brackets, 28 and 15, marginal rates. That's it, two brackets. Today, there are 7 brackets.
Right.
And the top bracket is 37%. We never really, we fiddled with it in the first term, the first bill. We had a little widening, some indexation. But 7 brackets, Steve, at 37 at the top. We can do better than that. You know what I mean? I mean, that's a long stone's throw from the Forbes flat tax. I'm just saying, nobody talks about that. But that is, that's out there. We can do better.
Yes, and even if we don't get a flat tax this round, you could take 2 brackets that hit the middle class, the 22 and 24% brackets, and reduce both of those to 15%. That finally buries once and for all the concern about losing the deductions.
When I was at the NEC, I tried.
We got to do it again, because the more people see that we're relieving their burdens. And by the way, if you ask most voters what have Republicans done for you this year, saying, well, we avoided a disaster last year with a big, beautiful bill and put in some good stuff, that makes no registration today. We got to come up with some brand new great stuff and say, if we win those elections, by golly, you're going to have real good times ahead, and we're already starting by reducing your tax burden.
I mean, I do think, John McLaughlin, going back to your polls, look, you just had basically $100 billion tax cut. About 55 million people cashed in on it. Now, they're mostly deductions. They're not the kind of marginal rate reduction that supply-siders like Steve and I wanted. But nonetheless, it's a lot of money, and tips and overtime and seniors and cars, and, it's all there. Trump's going to be outselling it. He was in Vegas and Arizona, and I think he'll be outselling it. But, of course, he's got a war to run. But, that's a good thing, right? People are getting in other words, instead of losing money this tax year, a whole lot of people made money, John. That's got to be worth something.
Yes, but after 4 years of Biden inflation, it's a challenge, because what we need to win the midterms is economic growth. Yes. I mean, this national poll that we just had, the top issue is economics, 45%. And when you ask people, if the economy is getting better or worse, 2-1, they think it's going to get worse.
Yeah, I know. Why is that? Why is that?
Because they're being sold by the media that it's going to get worse. And also, when they were getting their taxes done, they could see they got refunds. But they don't have, like when Ronald Reagan passed his tax cuts, you had paychecks and people would see a net pay increase. Now it's on their credit cards, and young voters are paying double digits on credit cards. The average is like 16% on a balance of $6,000 every month for the average voter that we're finding in surveys. So the good thing is, if they are told the truth about the Trump tax cuts, then they think the economy is getting better, 57%. We need to do that. It's a big and a
Steve Forbes. Thank you very, very much, as always. John McLaughlin, thank you. Listeners, terrific stuff. Hope you stayed for it. I'm Kudlow. We'll be back next weekend. God bless everybody.
Thanks for listening to The Larry Kudlow Show. You can hear The Larry Kudlow Show Saturday mornings at 10. If you like the podcast, share it with your friends and listen anytime at WABCRadio.com and download the WABC Radio app. Hit that subscribe button on all major podcast platforms. Plus, follow WABC on social on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and X. See you next time for a new episode so you never have to wonder.
What the heck is going on here?